Welcome to the EcoParent Podcast Network. I'm Sam, the founder of EcoParent magazine. My partner Alexis and I had zero experience in the publishing industry, no money, and a new baby. But we quit our jobs, leapt into the unknown, and started EcoParent magazine anyway. It was absolutely freaking terrifying. But at the same time, it felt right. Just a few years into the journey, Alexis was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer that later found its way to her brain. It was utter chaos, navigating treatment schedules, caring for a 3-year-old, and trying to run a fledgling business, not to mention the general emotional havoc. Alexis didn't make it, but the rest of us did, and I've spent the years since raising a wonderful son and building EcoParent into North America's top print magazine for conscientious families. Even 10 years in, we're still a very small crew. If you send an email, it's probably me that will answer you. And this podcast network is a monumental step for us, another leap into the unknown. But like before, it just feels right. And I know that Alexis would agree that the podcasting team I've assembled here is an incredible group of people whose only goal is to inspire the best in you. Okay, I'm going to shut up now and let you listen to the podcast. Thank you so much for stopping by. You're the reason we do what we do.
We've really removed ourselves from the greater ecosystem that we have evolved with over millennia. Living out of sync with the sun, not eating real food, not getting sleep or movement. These things have such a huge impact.
The Feeding Families podcast is all about nutrition for kids. We bring you new ideas and inspiration for your kitchen and answers to your food questions so you can overcome the very real, very frustrating food-related challenges so many parents are trying to figure out. I'm your host, Jess Sherman, family wellness educator, author, practitioner of functional and holistic nutrition, and mother. I want you to develop unwavering confidence in the choices you make every day, so let's get into Feeding Families. Hello, families, and welcome to another episode of the Feeding Families podcast. I am your host, Jess Sherman, and I have a guest with me today, Dr. Catherine Clinton. Thank you so much for spending this time with us, Catherine.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored and so excited to talk with you today.
Now, we have a lot to talk about. I originally reached out to you because I get a lot of questions about the gut microbiome and, things that we can do to support our body's resilience. I mean, that's really where I focus. And I know that's where you focus as well. And as these questions were coming in, I thought no better person to talk about this than you. How to support the microbiome, how to support the connections within our bodies, and how to help people understand the powerful tools that they have in their kitchen to really support their whole body, including their gut microbiome and the vast impact on that.
Absolutely.
But before we get into that, let me just introduce you. Dr. Catherine Clinton is a licensed naturopathic physician. She practices in Eugene, Oregon, and she is a speaker, an author, a pediatric health advocate, and her focus is on gut health, on autoimmunity, and psycho-neuro-immunology, which I'm going to have to get you to explain what that is in a second. Before we go there, though, if you go over to Catherine's website, I was struck by what you have embedded in your stories there, which is this. Well, I'll just read it because I wrote it down. I liked it so much. We have steadily marched away from what we have evolved with as humans over millions of years. That's where I want to start. Can you kind of unpack that a little bit for us?
Absolutely. I think it's really foundational to understanding where we are in our health crisis, this epidemic of chronic disease that we're seeing in our kids and adults, really. And I think it comes down to that statement. We've really removed ourselves from the greater ecosystem that we have evolved with over millennia. And so we think about the immune system, or we think about the gastrointestinal system or the gut microbiome. Any of these things we think of in isolation. And we often think of them as a measure of protection against the outside world. But really what they are is a messaging system. So it's not so much they're protecting us from the outside world, they're relaying information from our environment, from the food we eat, from the thoughts we think, from the community and the safety we have there or lack of safety. It's so many things. Our body, our biology is really a messaging system. And the gut microbiome really acts as a relay system in that messaging system. And we've walked so far away from the safety signals that we have evolved forever with. And it's no wonder that our biology is sending out danger signals, because there's so many signals that it's getting that set off that danger signal, processed food, all the different layers, sleep, food, movement, community, all of that is working together to make sure our body knows that it is where it's supposed to be versus this chaotic message signals of danger. That's really what we're dealing with. When I see patients in my office, we're not dealing with one thing. We're dealing with layers of danger signals. And once we start to remove them, once we start to silence them, once we start to replace them with signals of safety, then the biology resets. So it's really an amazing thing to journey on and to witness my patients as well. It's just beautiful. And so I can't think of anything more rewarding.
This idea of the signals of safety is really interesting, because that, I think, is talked about in, psychotherapy or even psychiatry, in terms of like putting yourself in a safe environment and talking to yourself in terms of you're safe, you're okay, and creating that socially and environmentally in our relationships. But what you're talking about is actually teaching ourselves to have a sense of safety, and that when they don't feel safe, they go on high alert and they signal all is not well.
Absolutely.
It's a very different way of thinking about health and symptoms, right?
Mhm.
It's sort of suggesting that we should feel healthy. And if we don't, whether that's mentally unstable or physically unstable, or there's some sort of symptom in our, maybe our skin or our whatever it might be, that is a signal that there is this discomfort or this lack of safety
Absolutely.
being experienced on a cellular level.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when we say messaging, that's so big and vague, right? So I'm talking about neuropeptides. I'm talking about cytokines between immune cells. I'm talking about actual neurological innervation. We have nerves that go directly from our brain into the gut lining. There's no need for these chemical messages. There's direct innervations. There's so many different ways that our body is sending all these messages. And it's really a cellular feedback system. And it goes throughout our entire body, and something as simple as plants, fiber and plants can have such a ripple effect, So just with that example, right? That is a huge safety signal for our biology. We have evolved on this planet eating plants. Now, I'm not saying only plants, but I'm saying we had a lot of plants in our diet, a lot of fiber. And when we look at what's happening, what messages that fiber intake sends, let's walk through it. We eat that fiber, that resistant starch. It goes through our gastrointestinal tract. It's not fully digested, so it reaches the colon undigested. And then our gut microbiome, the bacteria in there ferment those resistant starches into short-chain fatty acids. And what happens when that conversion is going on is we have a boost of T regulatory cells. And our T regulatory cells are the part of the immune system that shuts down inflammation, shuts down allergic responses, autoimmune responses, the inflammation that causes behavioral changes, mood disorders. That's what T regulatory cells are doing. So at that instant where you have that production of short chain fatty acids. You also have that increase in T regulatory cells. You have the short chain fatty acids like butyrate, for example, that are going directly into the mitochondria and directly fueling their energy cycle and their ATP production, which fuels everything in the cell, the tissue, the organ, the body. So in just one example of a safety signal of eating plants and having plants in the diet, it sends a ripple effect through the immune system.
Energy production.
Absolutely. It's fascinating how it just ripples out across our biology. And when we don't have those safety signals, our body is on alert. It's looking to see where the heck we are, what we should do now, because this is a chaotic experience to be a human being that's not eating plants, real plants.
Yeah, that's an important distinction.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's what you're describing as a sense of a disoriented state, right? It's like if our bodies is not getting the inputs that it needs, then it enters this disoriented state and it's not going to have the right signaling. And it's going to be in this, is it a stretch to say it's in a sort of cellular state of anxiety of just
Oh, absolutely.
discombobulation and confusion and doesn't really know what to do. So of course that's going to then translate into symptoms that we can see.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anxiety. And then it goes to panic. And I do a lot of work with autoimmune patients, and myself, I've had 3 autoimmune diseases diagnosed, and I was diagnosed with Lyme disease as well. So I really had kind of a nice little list there to work through. But it's so common when you Google autoimmune conditions or autoimmunity, the standard definition is your body attacking itself. And what a way to rob us of our power and our connection and our ability to heal. Because that's not what's happening with autoimmunity. Autoimmunity is reacting to input from our environment. And with myself, with my patients, with countless people around the world, once we start taking away those inputs of danger that really come from our modern life, right? Living out of sync with the sun, not eating real food, not getting sleep or movement. These things have such a huge impact. And when we start to take away those danger signals, so to speak, and put those safety signals, those things that we have evolved with forever, then those symptoms fall away. Then those diagnoses flip. It's really incredible to see this in action.
That's really interesting because usually when you hear of an autoimmune response or even an allergic response, it's talked about as a dysfunction, right? It's like, oh, the immune system's misbehaving, it's not doing what we want it to do. But what I hear you saying no, it's actually responding totally appropriately to being in a disoriented state.
That's absolutely correct. And that's absolutely a product of our myopic focus on health. We reduce things down to, oh my goodness, these antibodies are attacking this tissue. That means your body is attacking itself. And it's like, we really need to zoom out. The things that we find in science through a microscope and through that myopic discovery are really important. They're amazing. That information is so important to us. But when we don't plug it back into the reality of the world we're living in, it really becomes useless because we are not so separate from what's happening in nature. And that's really coming full force. These last couple of years, it's becoming really quite evident that we can't remove ourselves so succinctly from the world around us and have good health. What we really need to be doing is tending to our health and tending to the world around us, because that's where true health comes from. And another thing that I really love to use, Jess, I really love to use omega-3 fatty acids with my patients and my family and myself, just like those resistant starches. And one of my favorite studies around omega-3 fatty acids is with infants in the NICU. So they were removed from their mothers because of medical necessity. And what we saw when they were removed is the predictable shift that comes with trauma from beneficial gut microbiome microbes to more harmful species of gut microbes. And so a simple intervention, they added omega-3 fatty acids to these infants in their bottles of breast milk, and they saw a complete reversal of the microbiome. So that shift that happened from being removed from their mothers, that shifted the microbiome from beneficial to harmful, was shifted back from harmful to beneficial with the addition of omega-3 fatty acids. And why is that? Is it because, we are discovering new things with our science all the time? Yes. And also we have evolved near waterways for the vast majority of our evolution as humans. We have been eating plants and we have been eating seafood. We have been by these waterways, and that is part of our genetic safety signals. Those are an easy way for us to let our biology know that we are still part of this ecosystem that we have evolved with forever, even though we have done a really great job of separating ourselves from it. So these seemingly small steps we can take to rebalance our microbiome or our immune system, our biology, are really huge ripples that go not only through our biology, but they ripple out through the environment around us. And so this is what I really like to talk about, is the bigger context of things, because then it starts to see this appreciation and relationship with the world around us that we've really put on the back burner.
My understanding of what you just said is that we know that there's a certain type of stress response that goes on inside a baby that's hormonal and very biochemical that happens when they have this felt sense of not being safe and this lack of attachment.
Yes.
So what you're saying is that to counteract that feeling, they introduce something that brings the signal of safety, even though it's not what they think they need at that moment, which is, and what a lot of people think that they need at that moment, which is get back to mom.
Right.
That there's another way that we can induce this sense of safety by introducing the fatty acids. Did I get that right?
That's absolutely right.
Oh, that's so cool.
Isn't that amazing?
So by extension then, it really is as simple as when we eat foods from the earth, we are bringing a felt sense of safety to our biology and to our cells. And when we eat foods that are fake and processed and full of chemicals, our body doesn't get those safety signals.
Right. It's really that simple. It gets the opposite. It gets danger signals.
Right.
It's really that simple. Yet at the same time, it's a big shift in how we think. It's not this
huge.
Yeah, this guarding and us against the world. It's really, we don't end at the barriers of our skin. So starting to shift the way we think about health and disease is really important, especially right now.
Yeah. And I mean, there's so many other pieces of this that have been explored in terms of what happens to our biology when we're in the forest, when we're in the natural environment. There's, people looking at nature deficit disorder and what that does to our psyche. There's people looking at how attention and concentration are improved just by having access to looking at the forest, let alone being in it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's lots of, attachment trauma research that's looking at how to reattach kids who have attachment disorders and things like that. And this falls right into that. How do we teach our bodies that it's safe and secure? And what you're saying is that we do that through every piece of food that goes in our mouth.
Absolutely. And now is probably a good time for me to explain that psycho-neuro-immunology piece, because it's not just what we put in our mouths. It's really everything around us, including our thoughts. So, back to that study with the infants, did that omega-3 fatty acid make them feel like they were being held by their mother? No, it did not, right? I mean, I can assume that it didn't, because we know how it feels to be held by a mother.
It's very complicated, complex biology that's going on when you're being held by your mother. It's not as simple.
Absolutely. And so really what that study is pinpointing is that even when we have distressing thoughts, if we can fortify our physical body, then we are going to be more able to deal with those times of mental anguish, right? If our physical body is up to the challenge, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the same thing holds true in reverse. So our thoughts have such an important impact on our physical biology, on our inflammation, on our disease progression, on all of those things, that whole network of danger and safety signals,
Mm-hmm.
it is listening to every one of our thoughts. And when we get stuck in those, self-depleting thoughts, that's when we send those same cellular signals of danger, and our biology is always listening. So, we talked about those infants and how they had that shift from beneficial microbiome to a harmful one with those distressing thoughts of separation. What we see is that can last a lifetime, that pattern, that shift in the gut microbiome. And they have done research with PTSD survivors, and they look at, what are their T regulatory levels? What are all these things impacting them? And one of the most interesting studies that I've read in the last few years shows that cognitive behavioral therapy does that same shift that omega-3 fatty acids does. It shifts that damaged microbiome, that harmful combination of microbes, back to a more beneficial species, because it's all interconnected. Like we said before, there's neurons that are in our brain that go directly to the lining of our gut. And so it's really intimately connected. Our thoughts can hold that same power to send signals of danger or safety. And when we think about the way modern life has us set up, we really do have to put practices in place that we aren't in that stressful, just go, go, go sort of mindset, because that, really works against that. And cultivating a mindfulness practice, or, I really love heart coherence. I do that with my kids and my family and patients. Just any kind of stress reduction, mindfulness, self-care that we can do for our mind and our mood, and our children's minds and moods will directly impact our physical health and their physical health. It's so amazing, the connections.
Hey parents, this episode of the Feeding Families podcast is being brought to you by the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition. Are you aspiring to start a career in holistic nutrition? Looking to achieve optimal health and well-being and help others do the same? CSNN's Natural Nutrition Diploma program can help you gain a well-rounded understanding of scientific, holistic, and practical applications of natural nutrition. Earn your diploma, professional designation, and title, and join the over 11,000 graduates worldwide. The comprehensive science-based curriculum provides a strong foundation for a career in the holistic nutrition industry. Learn how to create individualized health support programs for clients. With part-time and full-time schedules and flexible learning formats, including live online classes, there's something for everyone looking to improve their overall health and well-being with holistic nutrition. There are multiple CSNN branches across Canada, plus online distance education options. Learn more at csnn.ca/holistic-family or follow the links in the show notes. I always try to help families that I work with develop a sense of curiosity, because I find that the easiest way to dislodge yourself from the stress and the chaos of raising kids, especially if they're struggling with some kind of an issue, is to get curious. And because then you can kind of become objective and have more control over your responses to your kids and their quirkiness or their, whatever they're going through. That's where your words took me, is to say, anything we can do to help ourselves as parents just kind of open yourselves up to what is going on right now and what can I do? It helps us be less reactive so that we can communicate those calming signals.
Absolutely, absolutely. Co-regulation is huge. And I think, as a global society, we're really missing out on that piece of health
Mm-hmm.
because our ability to co-regulate is immense and we're not always conscious of that, right? So if I start screwing my face up and talking in a different tone of voice, that immediately registers in your nervous system. And changes we make to our own reactions are mirrored in our kids, and that gets mirrored in the bigger extended family, which gets mirrored in the community, which gets mirrored in society. And that's really the level we need to be working at and mindful of, is that those ripple effects. Sometimes parents say to me, it's just my family though, and it feels so overwhelming, everything. And it's like, well, that is the path, is with ourselves and with our family. That's really the ripples that change the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I think a lot of parents get frustrated when they're trying they're just trying to keep their kid healthy. And because often our health is just viewed in a very compartmentalized way. If you have a brain problem, you go to a brain doctor. If you have a heart problem, you go to a heart doctor. You go to GI problem, you go to gastrointestinal, right? And
Yeah,
what you're saying is that doesn't really make sense, because now we know that the body works as this interconnected ecosystem, not only as an ecosystem itself, but also in conjunction with the environment that it's in.
absolutely.
So it really needs to be looked at all as one system.
And I think like the hesitancy on the part of the medical community is like, oh, this is so huge to look at all this. This is too big. I want to look at my piece. And that's understandable. But as a parent, it becomes paralyzing almost that it's not connected, that I need to have the level of expertise as a GI, as a gastroenterologist, to understand what's wrong with my child, or an endocrinologist, or a neurologist. All of these things, these specialties, kind of negate the overriding connections that are working. And those
Mm.
overriding connections are really empowering for parents because they are filled with options. A safety signal might be an evening of pizza and a movie. Whereas if you were to say to me, is pizza the thing we do to send safety signals to the body? I would hesitate. I don't know if that's what I'd put at the top of my list, but it's really working with each person individually. And that's where parents shine.
Yeah.
We know ourselves, we know our kids, and we can address this without being an expert in what happens in the gastrointestinal tract, right?
Parents are the experts in nourishing their kids. And nourishing is a lot of different things. Nourishing could be the pizza and the movie night, right? Because you need that sense of
Yeah,
connection. It could be what they're eating. I feel as a parent, like the way you described things brings actually a level of simplicity to how to raise healthy kids, because it's not about the micromanaging of the body, which is so complex and crazy, right? It's like it just gets really complicated
right.
when you try to look at the minutia of how the body's working. But if we look at it from a systems level, and exactly what you just said, we can focus on what we actually can do as parents, which is make sure our kids are moving and hydrated and eating real food and sleeping and feel safe and connected.
Yeah,
I mean, what else does a child really need?
right, right. And and it's such a simple list, but our world doesn't make it very easy, right?
Right. Yeah, it's simple. It's not complicated, but implementing all of this in our very busy lives, when everybody is stressed out and working and busy, and food's expensive and the kids are picky and so many things to juggle, gets really confusing. So, yes, simple but not easy. So let's talk about that. If somebody is listening and saying, "Okay, well this makes sense. I know we should be eating less processed food and more plants. And we should be having family dinners together because Dr. Catherine Clinton is saying that it's all connected. And I understand in an abstract way that there's biochemistry going on that's going to make my kid healthier and my family happier if we do this. I don't need to necessarily understand the nuts and bolts of that. You could take Catherine's word for it. But how do I do it? Because I also heard you say making changes, which I also say to my clients, making changes has to be more helpful than it is stressful, because if you're taking out the stressful food and you're just replacing it with the stressful family meal that nobody wants to be at, then you're no further ahead. You've just taken one stress out and you've added another stress.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some practical pieces. What do you see in the people that you work with that really help them make strides in their health?
I think that one of the things that I've found most powerful in my patients and their children is circadian rhythm and tending to that balance. So a lot of kids I see today are chronically tired, and it's not necessarily tied to the amount of sleep they get. And our bodies just can't do that. They're not made to do that. You know, sleep is our restorative, repair, rebuild. That's when we grow time. And so one of the most powerful things I think that my patients and my family are able to do that's free is going outside in the morning. Going outside in the morning, getting that sunlight, even through the eyes. You know, I'm here up in the Pacific Northwest and it's cold and we often don't see the sun. You know, it's behind a thick layer of clouds, but that sunlight through the eyes, even if we're bundled up, it sends all kinds of messages that kind of sync our biology, our growth hormones, serotonin, melatonin, all of these things, dopamine. And it has such a real profound effect on people's moods, their immune system, their energy, and their sleep. Just with something like getting sunshine in your eyes before 10 a.m. And that's what I love. I love to start people with things that are free that can be done starting today. And that's an easy one, going out and making sure that sunlight is there before 10 a.m. And then conversely, lowering those lights at night, right? So if we or our kids are on a screen a couple hours before bed, while we fall asleep, we're not getting the same quality of sleep. So salt candles, you can get red lights, you can get, what am I talking about? Salt lamps, not salt candles. You know, but just a different lower level of light. Again, sets a whole cascade of hormones in our body that we're not aware of until we're, you know, not feeling bad and wondering why. So that's, you know, really getting in rhythm with the sun and our circadian rhythm. I think that is a huge one. And like we talked about, getting resistant starches through plants and omega-3 fatty acids through seafood and algae. Vegans do not need to be omega-3 deficient. There are all kinds of things out there that can help us get our fatty acids in. And just those two things, you know, I have a page on Instagram, 30 plants a week. And it's something that I love to do with my kids is just make it into a game. What vegetables are we doing this week? What fruits are we doing? How can we increase that? And it becomes then sort of a habit. It's almost impossible at my house to have a salad without 3 kinds of nuts and hemp seeds and a little bit of seaweed, because I'm just like, pack it in. And then it becomes a ritual, a routine. And so being mindful of ways to get different plants in, variety, spices, that adds a completely different input on our biology and syncing our circadian rhythm. And then if there was a final one that I could say, I would also say that connection. To listeners out there today, I would encourage you to Google a heart math on YouTube exercise or a heart coherence exercise. And basically what that is deep breathing and focusing on a feeling of gratitude or belonging and bringing that into your heart. And doing that as a practice with your kids and with yourself can be really, really transformational. It opens those doors that, beckon us into a whole new room of mindfulness and that connection of how our thoughts affect our physical body. So that's something that I would encourage everyone listening today. I absolutely love those exercises, and they're short. They're 2-3 minutes long. It's something that we can fit in our day easily. And there's so many out there too. So if you go and Google heart math and heart coherence, and that isn't fitting with what you're feeling, just look underneath that video, because there are so many different meditations and mindfulness exercises that help us kind of gain insight and control over our thought processes and over our reactions. So those 3 things are hands down the most powerful medicine I have in my toolkit.
And I want to just emphasize something too, is like we've talked a lot about, some deep biological sciencey stuff, but bringing it back to something very simple, like these 3 things you can do, have more variety of plants, get some sunlight in the morning, and foster some sense of connection in your kids and bring feelings of gratitude in. Those are very simple and straightforward. And I think it's important to just emphasize that you don't have to understand how it works. You can enter this with a sense of curiosity and as an experiment with your kids. Like we sometimes as parents feel like we need to fix our kids, or we need to know everything before we try something and make sure that this is the right choice to do. And I just want to encourage people to just enter that space of curiosity and just say, hey, guys, we're going to try this and we're going to see what happens.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And that curiosity and that openness then opens up other windows. So these 3 things aren't meant to be Dr. Catherine Clinton says this and I must do this, right? These are ways, these are paths to reconnect. And then you will find what speaks to you and your family. And that's the magic right there. That's the healing, is finding those results. And that's what this does, is something as simple as syncing with your rhythm with the sun, or eating a variety of vegetables, or finding connection, a safe harbor for our kids. What we do when we come into it with curiosity and openness is we see what happens. We see the results. We see the power of those connections, and that opens us up to more connections. It's the most amazing thing that I've witnessed as a doctor.
Yeah, I think it also opens up space. It opens up a little bit of space to breathe.
Yeah.
And that in itself is probably what we all need most, right? Just take a breath and create some space.
Absolutely.
You gave us so much to chew on. And I know these are big topics, and you've done a great job of like zooming out. This is a fundamentally different way of understanding our kids, our relationship to the kids, our relationship to the natural world, how our body connects with itself and communicates within itself. So I encourage people to just sit with this, let it settle in, and listen to it a few times, understanding that this is a different way of thinking than most people think, in the conventional medical world.
Mhm.
But it's very much rooted in physiology and biology and an understanding of how the body works. There's tons of research on it.
Mhm.
And what I take away from it is that raising healthy kids feels very complicated. Feeding kids feels very complicated, but what they actually need is very simple.
Well said. It's reconnecting to those simple ways. And it's not an either or, right? We have so many amazing things that our modern lives offer. If we can just plug that into the bigger context, then we are on the right path.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I'm let's leave it on that note. I find Dr. Catherine Clinton has she's very active on Instagram, and these sorts of messages I find resonate with me strongly. But then life gets busy and life gets in the way, and you constantly need little reminders, and you do a great job of just giving us these little hits of these little reminders. It doesn't have to feel so complicated. Here, try this little thing. So thank you, Catherine, so much for coming and joining us and sharing your insights and your wisdom. I really appreciate your time. And we will post links to your website and your Instagram here so people can find you and get their little dose of Dr. Catherine as they need it.
So, if you listen to podcasts or watch YouTube, you've probably heard it 1,000 times before. The plea to subscribe and leave a review or a comment. Well, here we are again. But seriously, the review is especially important to us, as it has a huge impact on our discoverability amongst the zillions of podcasts all competing for your attention. So please consider leaving a review. And heck, we'd really love to hear your feedback. This pilot episode of the EcoParent Podcast Network was made possible with the generous support of Ontario Creates. Thanks for listening.